Free to join in and fill in on spaces. Thank you guys so much for being here live in person and for those virtually for our race and fitness talk here at Community Unify Roanoke. We're planning for the next 90 minutes for it to be a very open and honest and raw discussion. So ask questions. In the audience, we'll come around and let's use the mic so everyone can hear. Virtually, we have a monitor, Alex Moore, who will be checking those questions if you want to put them in the chat box, and we'll make sure to get them addressed. And I'm going to get things started with our lovely panel. We've kind of prompted them to, one, tell you who they are, and two, talk a little bit about their racial perspective and why they're here today. And I've also asked them, when they introduce themselves, to kind of talk about how race has impacted their participation or pursuit of fitness and athletics. So we've got a few prompt questions for our lovely panel up here today, but feel free to jump in. We want this to be engaging. We want this to answer questions you might have. We want you to also voice your opinion and be heard in a relationship that's related to race and fitness, especially since it hits so close to home in these days and times right now. So it's something that our gym community can talk about, and we're so glad we have this platform for everyone to join. So I'm going to turn it over to our audience to introduce them, our panel to introduce themselves. So.
Hello, everyone. My name is Donald Jackson. So I am a brown person in this panel. No, I'm just kidding. So my name is Donald. I'm from Northern Indiana. I have participated in sports all throughout high school and things like that. Obviously CrossFit and weightlifting now, as well as I played rugby for a while before CrossFit stuff. So played a lot of sports in a lot of different places and things like that. So I've always enjoyed doing that kind of thing. Throughout that time, I would say, obviously, you know, race plays in a lot of things in our society, of course. Sports is no different than that. One of the things that I feel like I've personally experienced a lot is, in general, just trying to get positions in sports. Not so much for me, CrossFit or weightlifting, but, you know, position on the football team or on the basketball team or something to that effect, where I would say black face in a white place a lot of times. So often those battles would be kind of heated sometimes. People would have certain feelings that they like lose to me because I'm black. Same thing I've experienced in my work career, you know, just in general, corporate America. Sometimes, you know, you're going through the same position as somebody else. If you get it, that other person has feelings about it, you know, and sometimes that's because you're black. So I've definitely had a lot of those kinds of situations in my life that I've dealt with, and that's kind of shaped part of why I'm here today.
Hi, I'm Cientia Henderson. Most of you know me by my nickname, which is Keisha. I'm from Roanoke. I went to Community High School. I've been playing sports my entire life. Started out with ice skating, dance, and gymnastics. None of those lasted very long because I don't like to do what I'm told, apparently. So then I kind of found strength sports. So I played soccer for over 15 years, basketball, field hockey, softball. Race in my life, I actually brought some props for this. I found some like old team pictures, which I don't know if you guys will be able to see if I can pass around. Kind of what Donald said about being a black face in a bunch of white faces. I was often, always, the only black person on these teams. So I have a lot of stories about parents and coaches and just kind of life from my experiences with that.
So I'm Duryea Lefowich. Pronounced Duryea is my technical first name. Some of you guys know me as Kevin. I really didn't play any sports in high school. I went to Emerson County High School, which is predominantly white school. It is in the country. So I didn't really have that experience of, you know, having to compete against anybody. But I will say that while I was in high school, I did fear joining like a sports club just because everyone on the team didn't look like me. So
I'm Kat. I have a master's in social work, so that's some of my background. And then I'm also happily married to a Black man. And every day we experience coming from two different cultures and learning how to bridge those. Growing up, fitness and health were big priorities of my family, mostly for aesthetic reasons, which I felt like was a lot of pressure and expectations. But fitness has always been a way for me to clear my head, and it keeps me sane. And for me, CrossFit has just been an awesome way for me to feel like some of the like girly ways of working out, some of the things that they would see as flaws, I feel like can be strengths here, and so I really appreciate my CrossFit fam.
Hi, I'm Brianna. I just joined Unify like a month ago, and I'm so excited to be part of this community. I go to 5:15 in the morning class, so I see like 2 people I know. The rest of you, maybe I'll see you around soon. I grew up in Lynchburg, Virginia. I went to Jefferson Forest, so a predominantly white community in a white school. I have always been active. It was preached to me that you exercise every day before you do anything. That is like the first thing we had to do in our family. So I came to CrossFit like a year ago, and growing up in a white community as white privilege, I didn't experience some of the things that we're going to talk about today until more recently when the organization I was involved in didn't take actions that I felt like were appropriate, and people didn't stand up the way that they should have. And that was the first time that I kind of experienced a racially charged environment in a predominantly white CrossFit organization. And so I think sharing my experiences from there, and then also my racial education, which is something I've been working on pretty avidly for 10 or so years. Hopefully my experiences in shifting my mindset can help you guys.
Thank you, guys. If you don't know, as audience members and those watching from afar, these are awesome people to get to know, and you're only going to get a taste of the great conversations that I've had the fortunate privilege to have with them in the last couple of weeks. So definitely, if we don't address a question or anything, feel free. There's contact information out that you can reach out and follow up. And 3 of them happen to be our coaches, so that makes it even better, because you can find them regularly at class here. So the next prompt is, in what forms do you think racism, however subtle, exists in fitness spaces? And this does also relate to CrossFit, functional fitness, and weightlifting, and you can provide examples of your own experiences.
Yeah, so I think, so I've always enjoyed athletics in general. Like I've always just enjoyed being active, doing things that that kind of like push you physically and whatnot, even though I didn't really know like what kinds of things I wanted to do. I was always open to trying new things, like, like hiking or like rugby. Okay, there are other things other than hiking, but like rugby, CrossFit, weightlifting, all that kind of stuff. So I've always been, and I rock climbed for a while, so when I weighed a lot less before the weightlifting. So in general, I've always been really into those trying new things, but also I've really been into communities where, in general, everybody kind of does this thing that they do, and it doesn't really matter kind of who you are or like where you come from. CrossFit's a great example of that. There's all kinds of people here from all kinds of backgrounds that perform all kinds of jobs on a regular basis. Like sometimes I come in, I'm like, man, I had a hard day at work. And then it's like a doctor person who's like, yeah, I gotta go back to surgery. I'm like, it's a lot different than my hard day at work, So people from all different kinds of backgrounds and whatnot. So I've always gravitated to those kinds of communities where, like in rugby, it doesn't really matter who you are, what you look like. You're all doing this thing, this shared agony, this shared activity that's really hard. And when you're successful, it's awesome. And when you're not, you kind of lose as a team kind of thing. So same thing with CrossFit, same thing with weightlifting, really. Everybody kind of is competing against the weight on the bar, and whatever that weight is for them personally, it's always different for a different person, So I've always loved those kinds of things. With that, I will say CrossFit in general is something that I feel like, I CrossFitted for a long time. Like I CrossFitted before I did weightlifting. So definitely love, like one of my favorite things about CrossFit is when it's like just over halfway through the WOD and you're like, man, I cannot finish this today. Like this is not happening. Why am I here? Why am I paying for this? You know, and then you like push past that little area and then you get to like the next level where you're like, okay, only 2 minutes left to go. Like let's see if we can get another round, like that kind of thing, you know? That really drove me as a person. And I say all that to say, so in this space, I definitely felt like really included. I felt at the the gym that I was at, I felt really included. The owners that were there really showed me a lot of love and that kind of thing. So I felt really awesome about CrossFit for a long time, and I still do as like the activity, as like the sport. I think that so some of my experiences within that, traveling for work and going to places where there aren't very many Black people. Like I would drop in at a gym in Wyoming, and there's no other Black faces there, right? So some of the ways that people would kind of approach me, or the conversations that we would have would kind of lean toward something that I'm not used to in this space, that kind of thing. So I think those kinds of things happen, and I think in general, sometimes those socioeconomic things come into play, or I'm not used to seeing a person who looks like you in my space, so that can be a thing for people sometimes. But I think in general, like, I think I've had overall good experiences, but obviously with the Greg Glassman comments that came out recently and seeing people react to something that to me is just, not only is it, obviously racist, right? And I know that's a word that like sounds really hard to people sometimes, like racism, like racist, I think that it's important to remember that like people who are, so people can have behaviors that are poor, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean that is inherently who they are, but sometimes people's behaviors are because of inherently who they are, right? Like there's both sides of that, right? I can, as a man, one thing I've learned in the past couple of years is, I don't know about any other people in the room, but I don't know if you're familiar with Me Too. It was a movement that happened not too long ago, right? So when that was happening, I, as a man, was dumbfounded with some of the experiences that women were talking about, like in general, in their lives that are still happening at work. You know what I mean? Like at work, what? I'm having none of these experiences, So I legitimately sat back and I watched so many people's stories on various social media platforms, people talking about experiences they've had, things like that. And I just couldn't believe that this was a thing, like still, But in that time, though, I was able to really just kind of look internally and check myself as a man and say, man, am I making jokes that make people feel uncomfortable? Am I thinking about a person? Am I thinking about a woman coworker as less than because she's a woman? Like, am I doing those things, And I think one of the things one of the things I hope you out of this discussion is just for people to be able to have an honest internal look at themselves. Like everything that's going on in our country right now, that's the thing that I've been the most excited about. Excited is not the appropriate word, but it's an interesting time to be a Black person in America, because a lot of times people don't care about issues that generally affect Black people, but don't affect our nation at large, or communities at large, or people who are prominent enough in those communities. So it's been very interesting for me personally, and I've had a ton of people reach out to me online. Like I've tried to put myself out there so people can like ask questions or whatever. But I say all that to say, that's kind of what I hope to get from this thing today. So when you hear about experiences, when you hear about things, I don't think there's any reason to feel like guilt or shame or any of those things that we put on ourselves sometimes when we don't behave or haven't maybe responded the way that we wanted to, because anytime we get at one of those positions, we can always look internally and say, okay, that is what I've done, but that's not what I have to continue to do. So that's a very long answer. That would be the longest one today.
Okay. So how has racism kind of impacted my fitness? As far as weightlifting, I kind of agree with Donald. I have found the weightlifting community to be very welcoming. Haven't felt, like an outsider just because of my skin color in weightlifting. I would say was more when I was growing up, playing soccer. In fact, even my senior year in high school, I was the only senior who didn't start every game, but I was also the highest scoring player and made first team every season. And my coach would say these little like digs to my mom, and another white parent had asked him what was going on, like, is it because she's black? And he's like, well, she's not black like that. I'm black. I don't really know what that means, but there was just a lot that went on, and I had always thought I'd play soccer in college, and that senior year just kind of like ruined the sport for me. Having that experience, and it was just bad. So I have been happy with I don't CrossFit anymore, but I found weightlifting through CrossFit. And because that CrossFit community was so welcoming, opened my eyes to weightlifting in that community, and have felt very included. So yeah, that's my little story.
Like I said in my intro, I did not play any sports in high school or elementary school, mainly because my parents, they both work 2 jobs, and I have 2 brothers, so there's 3 of us. So my mom wouldn't be able, or my parents wouldn't be able to afford sports for all 3 of us and trying to pay bills at the same time. And so I think the reason why you don't see a lot of African Americans in, the CrossFit space or weightlifting space or fitness in general is really, I'm going to use the broader term, macro social influences, which includes, socioeconomic backgrounds, family, where you live, things of that such. And so that was probably the major reason why, which pushed me towards to do CrossFit, was just to overcome that barrier so that I can be the representation for people in the Black community.
So I'm going to go back and answer some of question 1. I didn't totally get that was going to be incorporated in my first thing. So, and I think it's a lot of why I was chosen for this panel. So it's how has race impacted your participation and pursuit? So for me, I went from attending Unify Monday through Friday, and the only time I wasn't here was because I was not at work, or we had a work trip or something like that, until I got married. And as my husband and I began to look at our finances and everything we were going to pay monthly, a gym membership was quickly seen as something that was non-essential and something to put off until later. It wasn't until I came to the end of myself and was so unhappy with my health, and my husband got a better job, that it was put back on the table. The backgrounds that my husband and I came from view fitness and health very differently. Where my background of white culture puts exercise, aesthetics, and nutrition on a pedestal that in and of itself can be unhealthy at times, his background sees these as superfluous and luxuries. For those who can afford them. The sad thing is, though, that not affording those luxuries end up costing way more in the long run than they would otherwise. The cost of obesity, diabetes, cancer, etc., on a person's mental, emotional, and physical health, along with monetary costs, are monumental. But when a person is just trying to make sure that they have food on the table, expending calories, gas, time, and resources on what seems unnecessary goes against their will for survival. And as we know, the majority of the time, our survival instincts will win out, and the long-term potential impacts will be discarded as they focus on the present and what is right in front of them. And this prompted me to look a little further into some statistics, and I found that in 2010, the median income for households headed by Black people in Virginia was $40,000, compared to $65,000 for Virginian households headed by white.
I love that you looked at statistics, because I love statistics. So, to piggyback off of that, I was looking at the actual composition of Roanoke City, since that's where we as a gym have our greatest impact, and Roanoke City is 30% Black. That means in every situation of 10 people, to be represented equal, it should at least be 3 Black people for every 10 people. And we don't see that, and I think that is one of the biggest niche, expensive things like yoga classes. Yoga classes help with your blood pressure, they help with stress and anxiety. And we know from studies that the Black community faces typically more stress and anxiety, but they don't. I mean, costs are $15 a piece. I can hardly afford them. Like, it's expensive to do that on top of an exercise regimen or gym membership. So, you know, in our society, poverty and race, unfortunately, almost go hand in hand. You know, in Roanoke City, 20% of the people live below the poverty line. That's huge. So if we're gonna really focus on racism and fitness, it's gonna also be making it more accessible. I think that's a big issue.
I just want to piggyback on that growing up family experience, because I know Brianna and Kat have talked about how fitness was a priority in their household. And I can say, you know, I'm not speaking for anybody else on the panel, fitness was not a priority in my household. It's never been, you know what I mean? It's always been a thing that I've been into, but like other family members, you know, extended and immediate, it's never been a thing. Like, that's just not a thing that is prevalent in the Black community. And I know, you know, to your point, that some of that is definitely because the return on investment is not always immediate, and it's not even always seen. Like, when I first started doing CrossFit, I was 26. No, I was 20 something, 27, somewhere in there, and my blood pressure was already getting high, just because as an African American male, you know, I want to say like 30 or 40% of us are predisposed to higher blood pressure, just, you know, genetics, you know what I mean? So thanks, Mom. All jokes, she's a great lady. But no, so, and when I started doing CrossFit, I was on the verge of, I just went to get like a checkup or what have you, and I was on the verge of like taking heart medication because like to control my blood pressure. And so literally when I started doing CrossFit and I, you know, stopped just eating like whatever was convenient and actually just like making choices as opposed to just doing this because out of survival mode or because I think this will last the longest or something like that, you know. I started like obviously seeing benefits, and then like I went back to the doctor. I had to have a checkup again in like 3 months or something like that, and literally my blood pressure was like completely back to normal, like it should have been for a person my age, that kind of thing. So, but I think that's not a thing that's prioritized, and that's another thing that, you know, in general we talk about. We're going to talk about later about actionable items. I want to come back to that just because I think there are things that we can do to like help people realize that, and also eating real food does not have to be as expensive as people think it is. Like, you don't have to buy like sirloin steak all the time. You know what I mean? Like a 3-pound thing of ground turkey is like $1 more or something like that than a 3-pound thing of ground beef. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like little choices like that, you know, will make it easier. But yeah, okay.
I'm going to improv on you guys because I think what you're beginning to touch on is some of the underlying issues, and I want to keep that conversation going because we've talked about it, but I think it's beneficial for all of them here. So I've expressed to you all that I find, and I'm going to stereotype, but it's not meant to be that way, that Black families are in a mode of survival, as Kat had mentioned, like most are, but in a mode of survival. Things that take longer to see results and provide benefits are not prioritized. And two of those things are health and fitness. So eating well and working out and taking care of your health are not things that have instant gratification. So related to that, I think that's also, along with the socioeconomic aspects, why you don't see as many Blacks in fitness realms. And this is outside of just CrossFit and weightlifting, which can also be a very costly activity, as we've talked about before. But I'd love for you guys to talk a little bit more, coming from diverse backgrounds of families that prioritize, families that didn't. What are your feelings in regards to why you think Blacks are not more in organized sports that aren't football or basketball, why there's less Black females in sports, and if you've noticed that or any kind of trends from that aspect.
Yeah, no, those are all great points, and I don't know if you can tell, but we're starting to get to the meat of the stuff, because this is like the real stuff that I would say typically as a Black person, I don't like talking about Black issues with people who are not Black. I know Sisha and I have had many conversations. Sisha and I weightlifted together, coached together, all that stuff. So we've known each other for a while. And we talk about things, obviously as life happens. And one of the things that we talk about is like the way that you may be received sometimes, trying to talk to someone about an issue that they don't necessarily deal with or inherently understand. Maybe they can't empathize with, kind of thing. So this is, even for me, like this is definitely stepping out of my comfort zone, if you will. My comfort zone is pretty big. So, so in general, I would say, yeah, definitely the survival mode aspect is such a real thing, because there are just so many times where you are going about your day, and you're just doing a regular thing, and something happens, and you don't necessarily know if that happened because you're Black. You don't know if that happened because you are a larger male. I used to have a big beard at the time. So, for instance, if I'm walking down the street and I'm walking by somebody and they don't know I'm coming, many times, this happened many times in my life, throughout different ages in my life, even when I was younger and 15 and scrawny, you know what I mean? A woman will have her purse on this side of her and I'll be walking by on that side. She'll flip that mug around real quick, right? As if, now give me some credit here, if I really wanted that purse, do you really think putting it on the other arm is gonna do anything for me? You get a little credit, don't don't emasculate me also. You know what I mean? It's Tuesday for crying out loud. Anyway, so there's been things like that, walking by somebody's car, walking my dog, just the other day, walking my dog. This person sitting in the car, boom, lock the doors. Now, are they locking the doors because they meant to? Are they locking the doors because they meant to earlier and they forgot? They're like, oh, there's a dog, I'm gonna lock the door, Maybe they didn't even see. But I think part of the deal with the Black experience, especially in America, is that there's a lot of stress and anxiety that comes from those kinds of situations, known and unknown, right? Was I not considered for that position because I'm Black? You know what I mean? Was I not considered for a raise because I'm Black? You know what I mean? You don't always know. And obviously we don't always know what those things are. But I think relating that to the greater conversation, so I think Black people in general are dealing with a lot of those kinds of things. And actually throughout my life, I've gone through this cycle. I've tried to explain this to Sisha before, but I've never told this to white people. So this is going to be an experience for us all. I go through this cycle. I start at the top where I'm fine and things are relatively fine. I have this experience that kind of makes me feel some type of way, right? I don't know if that was a racist experience. I don't know if it was whatever. Then I find out some actual racism in a way that I was not ready for. My last experience with this, the chiropractor that I was going to, fine, we're doing our thing, yada yada, starts talking about a story about attending BMI and how Black people at the time had a problem with the Confederate flag being on their class ring. So he starts telling me this story, telling it from a place of trying to relate, trying to, have some camaraderie. But it just became apparent to me right away, how inherently racist this whole thought pattern was for this guy. And so then I get to this place where I'm like, oh, not doing business or doing anything or blah, 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 with any people that are racist, not dealing with this, keeping my kiddo away, blah, blah, blah. And then you come back to this place around the corner where you're like, oh, but I still have to buy food and eat, and I'm not gonna sit in my house all day, I'm gonna go to places. So, and then I come back to this place where I'm like, okay, yeah, people are racist, but you still gotta live. And then I go through the cycle again. Growing up, Sisha was talking about some of those experiences growing up. I lived in a cul-de-sac with all white people, and when we moved out there, someone told the realtor that the property value was going to go down because we're the first Black family to move into this neighborhood. Real talk, I didn't know what that meant. Obviously, when I was younger, I still don't really, because I was advanced in those things. But so in that situation, I was living in this cul-de-sac, made friends with the other kids there. We would play video games, do all regular guy stuff or whatever. And then throughout time, one of the kids had a ring that had his name on it. Not his name, had his initials on it. There used to be a really popular thing where you have a guy would have this flat gold ring that would have his initials on it, that was a thing. Okay, maybe not, maybe I'm holding it, that's fine. It was a very popular thing in Indiana, I'll tell you what. And so this kid lost his ring. And so legitimately, everyone turns and looks at me because clearly I'm the person who took this other kid's ring who had his initials on it. We don't have the same initials, mind you. It was Kevin James Mock or something like that. Don't look him up on Facebook. He's not a real person. I just made that up. But so everyone looks at me and I'm like, oh my gosh, like what's going on? So legitimately, I'm talking, we are young. We're like not even 12. We're riding the bus. You know what I mean? These kids are not allowed to talk to me. They're not supposed to play with me. This went on for like 2 years. And then one day in the summer, one of the other kids came over to my house and my parents were like, what are you doing here? You're gonna get in trouble, you know? And the kid's like, yeah, Kevin found his ring. And I was like, oh, yeah, I know he did find his ring. I didn't have it. You know what I mean? Like, of course he's gonna find it eventually. He dropped it down in the airbag. You know what I mean? But like, in his room, you know? But it's just one of those things where it's like, in those situations, you know, like I get in this place where I'm like, okay, I'm doing fine, things are going well. This thing happens, now I'm scarred from that. Now I'm just gonna like shut everybody off who's anything remotely like that. But then many people have these like inherent biases that you don't know about. And when you find out about it, it's like, well, damn, you know, just like with CrossFit, it's like, oh, the owner of CrossFit is inherently misogynist and racist. Okay, that tracks. I didn't know it to be facts, but that tracks. So I don't want to support a business that is going to support that. So I would expect most businesses are just going to be like, yeah, we're not dealing with that. Everybody's welcome here at my business. But that's not what happens. That's not what everyone said. Some gyms did that, and I obviously joined the gym that did that on purpose because that was a choice that I made. But also, sometimes I think like, oh, this should just be happening all over. So I think some of those things are barriers that keep Black people from venturing out to spaces like this sometimes, because if you're coming to a space like this, and I've been obviously scarred in my own ways, but other people have been scarred much more. Like I've been pulled over a ton. I've been in handcuffs and all these. I've never been in jail. Like I've never even remotely committed a crime. I've been pulled over a ton. I've had to do field sobriety a number of times. Like after clearly saying I've had nothing to drink, but other people have had worse experiences that have scarred them more. That would definitely keep them away from like ever trusting white people again, or ever trusting this kind of the police or whatever. So I just think that like part of what I want to do, or part of what I would like to see happen in general in life is, and what I try to do when I talk to people, whatever, is try to just like make it okay for people to like ask the questions that they want to ask, but also make sure they're ready to hear the truth. You know what I mean? It's one thing to say, hey, what do you think about this? I'm like, well, if I tell you and it hurts your feelings, they're your feelings. You know what I mean? Like I'm not responsible for your feelings. So, but anyway.
Did you answer the question? I don't know.
I thought this was gonna be a safe space.
I don't even know what the question was anymore. But I made some notes off of today's Donald said, so whether that was the question or not. We talked about survival mode, and I think that's very accurate. Like I said, I played a lot of sports growing up, but my mom made a lot of sacrifices for me to be in those sports areas. And that survival mode, it's, random things will happen. You'll be at the grocery store and someone will call you the N-word. And that takes a toll on your day. And now with social media, you get online, you see someone who may have been killed just because of your skin color, and you're like, I have that skin color, that could have been me. And so it's like you're forced to either be super depressed all day or completely numb yourself, which is not healthy. And so the last thing you want to do is use any kind of energy for your physical health. Like that's just more stress. Growing up with sports, you're on a team, you got to travel, you have practice, might be after work hours, gas, money for uniforms. That's just added stress. That's not, good, like health for my child. No, that's just added stress. We're already going through so much stress every day that it's not a priority because it can't be. It's stress. It's not something positive. Donald made that mention of him moving in his neighborhood, and like I said, I'm from Roanoke, Roanoke County. We moved into our neighborhood, and I was young. I didn't know what was going on. Someone came, knocked the door, thinking, welcome to the neighborhood. Asked my mom, like, when did they allow Blacks to move into this neighborhood? Added stress, because now you have bought a house in this neighborhood with these neighbors that you see every day, and you know that these are their thoughts about you, and you can't change it, because, like, it's your skin color. It's not like I can, you know, they don't like blonde hair and whatever, dye my hair red. Like, you can't change these things. So there's just like everyday little stress that the last thing you want to do is crawl out of bed or leave your house and go exercise. Especially if you gotta pay for that exercise. There's just no way. So yeah, that survival mode just mentally doesn't leave you in a place to have a lot of extra time for physical activity. And it's, no matter where you live, it's gonna affect you if you're Black. You're gonna have racism. Doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, you're gonna, when you least expect it, you're gonna have to encounter it. And it's very, very draining.
To piggyback on what these two said about survival mode, I remember a time growing up when my parents moved into their house. We grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood. Is where we moved in, and I remember someone broke into our house when I was young. I was probably about 5 or 6. And one of the neighbors would break into our house almost every night and just like move stuff around just to try to scare us out of the neighborhood. And so that definitely does add extra stress, especially with my parents trying to take care of 3 kids. You know, they didn't prioritize, you know, health and fitness as number one. I don't think I even considered health and fitness until about 5 years ago when I found CrossFit. And the reason why I found CrossFit was because my doctor told me that I needed to do something. I had high blood pressure, I was 28 years old, traveling a lot for work. And when I would travel a lot for work, I would drop into all these CrossFit gyms and I would just see, you know, probably one Black person in the gym. And so I'm like, okay, well, maybe next time I'll try a different gym. And then you know, do the whole search and it's like, okay, well, if I see one Black person on the website, then, you know, I feel at least a little bit comfortable with, you know, dropping in. But yes, that's my experience.
And I just want to say that the cycle that you were talking about, especially Donald, like that is so real. And I think that although like you're saying that, you know, Black Lives Matter and like things like this, like the movement has like given voice to some people that wouldn't otherwise. I think also we have to keep in mind that that it has also made it exponentially harder, I feel like, as well, because like as being married to a black man, we dated for I think 3 years before we got married, and we had a lot of advocates. We had a lot of people who were obviously supporting us and loved us very well. But during the Black Lives Matter, when I mean it's still going on, but especially when it started, it was like we found out these like that those who had supported us, even who even helped plan our wedding, etc., paid for stuff. We find out, oh, but underneath it all, they're not. They might say one thing, they might support us in like in a one-on-one relationship, be like the best, like the dopest, like love on us so well. And then during this movement, I mean, it just completely flips upside down, and you're like, wait, you're saying this, but I'm seeing something totally different, right? Like we even moved churches after this. Like the stuff that we started to see come out of people was just unreal. And so I just feel like right now, as white people, especially, we can recognize that this is an especially difficult time. I feel like where I feel like people of color have every right to, and to feel that at the end of that cycle of like, you know what, forget them all, like, because they don't know who to trust. And so I just feel like right now, like, be an ally to the best of your ability, because for every ally you have other people who are letting you down and disappointing you, like people who are like pillars in your life.
And to piggyback off that, I think for white people, it's really hard to understand and where systematic racism, which is a term that's being thrown around constantly right now, actually intersects with individual racism, which is what we're hearing experiences. So in our society, we have this huge systematic racism, and as individuals, we can decide to participate in that and be okay with that and be quiet about it, or we can stand up and we can do the right thing. And I think that that's a really important distinction to keep in mind, because listening to their individual experiences takes part in a larger community that makes that behavior okay.
Thank you, guys. Let's talk about the elephant in the room related to CrossFit. And for context, I think it would be beneficial to kind of talk about the history, because I'm one of those people that got into CrossFit and stayed in it because of the community and chose to ignore the larger behind the scenes systematic things that were happening. So I'd love for Duryea to kind of talk, because you have this broader national CrossFit experience that I think people need to recognize and hear about. So if you'll just give some context to the group about how we got to here related to CrossFit and your experience with that.
Yeah, so in case you don't know, I volunteer my time helping CrossFit Games, regionals games for the past 5 years. I've worked on the signage, I've worked as a judge, just various little positions, so kind of in tune with CrossFit in general. Even now, even after everything that's happened with Greg Glassman's tweet, I think his tweet came at a very odd time, and I think it was just disrespectful. I mean, in like everything that happened with George Floyd's death, I think it was insensitive for him to tweet, especially with CrossFit has always preached, CrossFit is for everyone. And there has been an outcry for more diversity in CrossFit, in the CrossFit space for years. And for it to come now, 10 years later or 12 years later, however many years CrossFit's been around, it really shows you that it wasn't a priority to begin with for Greg Glassman and his leadership. So, I mean, with the exception of last year at the games, there were tons of people that looked like me before the first cut. So you get, you get there and you're like, okay, yeah. So I can see myself, being in the sport, but then after the first cut, there's like, no one that looks like you. I think it all comes down to exposure. Like I said, we're not really exposed to fitness at a young age in our families because it's not a priority. Especially in my family, it wasn't a priority, which is why I had high blood pressure but now, thankfully, because of CrossFit, I don't have to take any medications. CrossFit has helped me deal with a lot of mental issues. I lost my brother like about 5 years ago, my oldest brother, and so the reason why I found CrossFit was actually to help me cope. So that's also one thing that people don't realize when we talk about fitness, that it does encompass everything. It encompasses physical, mental, nutrition. So that's the whole soapbox.
I just want to speak to the importance of representation. I think, especially as a white person who has, I'm in the majority most of the time, not now, but I used to be in the majority most of the time. I've watched my husband. He has gone from he's been on a job train essentially, figuring out what he wants to do with his life. But watching him interview with companies and start off with them and work for them, I can just tell you that it has made a huge difference when that company has Black people in their brochures, when they have Black people in leadership, when his trainer has been Black, seeing him go from companies where it's mostly white people versus Black people, it just so showed me how if he feels represented, especially in leadership in a company, he feels like, okay, I'm going to be supported and I can succeed here. And if he doesn't see that, and he doesn't even know, he doesn't realize what he's doing, but I've just watched him, it changes the attitude that he goes in with, and it changes, that changes everything. It changes job performance, it changes, how hard he works, it changes whether he really thinks that he's going to be successful. And so I just can't stress that enough of how it seems like such a small thing, but it is just so, it speaks to so much more. It shows them what they can hope for. It shows them what he can be or what he can't be, and whether people are going to support him from within the company or not. And I'm grateful that our gym for sure has more of a representation than I think most gyms, even though we could use even more, but I am thankful that our gym does have that.
Speaking of CrossFit, I think representation is a big thing that we were talking about. I remember reading, I don't know if you guys know who Elizabeth Akinwale is. She's made quite a couple posts where in her CrossFit Games experience, she'd win an event, yet the main picture would be the second place white person, and her name would be very small. So Elizabeth won first place, but here's this person who won second place. So it's like not just representation, but giving credit for a job well done. And I can think of her name, but then I can also think like Brooke Wells, the daughters, Toomey. It's just how many Black people can I think of, and then how many white people can I just spit out just from representation? These are the people that we see over and over again. So I think representation is another thing that could be better.
And Angela mentioned this a little bit, but I think one thing too that's important to understand is when your family's in survival mode and health and fitness is not prioritized, the things that do get prioritized are the things that could possibly provide economic change. And so a lot of times that is why, number one, that's why basketball and football are prioritized, because those are two sports where there's a clear representation of, if you are a person from here and this is where you are, you can, if you work hard enough and if you have enough talent, you can get somewhere and change things for your family, right? Mm-hmm. And to your point also, you had mentioned how there's not as much of that for young Black girls. 100% that. And the reason for that is the same thing. There's not this clear path where it makes sense for mom to pay for tennis lessons or golf lessons or something like that. When in reality, those are sports where in general, they typically have lower participation. So if you have a kiddo that's pretty good at some of that stuff, they can get a college degree for free based off that, that kind of thing. But again, that's not something that is often prioritized in our community, because a lot of times our parents didn't go to college. A lot of times we're the first kids, even in, 2000, even in the year 2000, first kid to go to college, in your family and whatnot. So that kind of thing is still happening. But speaking specifically to CrossFit, so a couple things. One of these things that I've learned in life, sometimes you come along these nuggets and you're just like, man, that holds true a lot of the time, right? So one of the things I've learned is if it's not a yes, it's automatically a no, right? If I say, Eric, you want to go out with me? And he hesitates, that's a no, right? Because if it was a yes, he would say yes, right? You don't have to answer no. Just deal with it. Just because if it's a yes, it's a yes. I don't want nobody to have to think about me. That's just like a partial thing. Anyway, no. So in general, if it's not a yes, it's a no, right? So with the Greg Glassman comments in particular, right? The thing you said it came out at odd time period. The thing that is so crazy about that entire situation to me is that George Floyd is murdered. We have an outpouring of people upset about that. Businesses, billion-dollar businesses, and billion with a B, billion-dollar businesses are coming out saying, yo, this is not cool. Or not, this is not cool. We are not going to support other functions, and our company is going to be open and all are going to be accepted, yada yada. Literally CrossFit, who has been preaching from day one. Everyone can come in. Fitness is for everyone. It's for everybody. It's for everybody. People no comments, super silent. People are CrossFit is putting out like totem bar tutorials and things on like, you know, their Facebook and stuff. People are commenting on this and saying, hey, great totem bar video. Where does CrossFit stand on the current issues that are happening right now? Like, what's good? Like, what are we talking about, you know? And, oh yes, I'm sorry, yes, thank you, that's a great point. This is before Greg Glassman said his comments. This is literally George Floyd is killed. That next like weekend, Reebok and all these people were like, yo, we are gonna be inclusive, blah, blah, like all these big companies that are also involved in fitness, right? And so all this stuff happens before Greg Glassman's tweet. So CrossFit is like literally just not responding to people, like not commenting back, not whatever, blocking them from being followed by like prominent CrossFitters were saying things like, yo, CrossFit, we say we're for everybody, where are you at right now? And they would literally just like block that person. Like this is a person that you've been able to make money off of because people want to be like, you know, little Maddie, you know what I mean? So, well, I mean, she's very strong, so it's not like, see, and what I'm gonna do with that is I'm gonna say, man, all right, let me not minimize that, because I can learn and grow. But no, seriously, so all, you know, people are asking these questions, people get blocked, it's just super weird. At this point, you know, like, just, like, how hard is it to say, we are gonna be inclusive of everyone? That's all you have to say. Nobody's asking for you to, like, start Black CrossFit gyms. Like, nobody wants that. Nobody would come to them. You know what I mean? Like, it wouldn't be a thing. Like, you would have to, you know, like, it wouldn't work. So, what, I mean, all people are asking for, like, what I'm trying to say is, like Black people are not asking for, like, retribution, for, like, oh, we need another person killed, or, you know, we want, like, I don't even know what. Most we want is like equal and fair treatment to where I walk in the store, I'm not considered a person who can't purchase something at that store because of what I look like. You don't know what I do for a living. You know what I mean? So in general, with that Greg Glassman situation, so all that's happening, nothing from CrossFit. And then he randomly tweets on some other health organization that tweet. That's the thing that got me. It's like, no one's answering, you're not answering your own business, but you're throwing this out there. You're throwing this super racist, super just disgusting tweet out on somebody else's thing. It's like, yo, like what? So that's the thing that got me. That's the thing that just made me feel crazy about that. And along the lines of the representation, you know, that, I mean, gosh, I gotta say, that is the thing that I just personally never think about. Like, I honestly don't think about it. If there's something I want to do or I want to whatever, I'm just gonna try to go do it. Don't get me wrong. The company that I work for now, I've been working for the same company for 10 years. We got bought out about 4 years ago. And so a lot of our senior level leadership is, you know, from like India and the Middle East and like many countries. So there's a lot of brown representation, and women also, which is something that I've never experienced before. But being a part of this company, one thing I will say is that after George Floyd was murdered, like our company like sent out stuff to people. My direct leadership reached out to me individually, was like, hey man, if you need time or if you want to like whatever, just holler at me. We can keep it off the table. We can whatever, you know, just people reaching out and doing cool things because of that. So that it is really important. I will say that. The other thing I was going to say that is I was at this conference in 2018 in Chicago, and it's the biggest educational technology conference in the world, right? So there's like literally 30,000 people there, and as a part of what my company was doing, we had like this booth that we built, like it's like a house basically indoors in this conference center, and people are coming through, and we're basically taking them on a tour of what our software solutions do for schools, right? Enlightening people of what we provide, so to speak. And so we had to wear these vests that were ordered in mass. So mine was a 2X because I can't risk an XL and something like that, you know? And so it's okay to laugh at that, that's fine. But no, so I got this vest, the 2X is a little too big. We have these super skinny ties and we're supposed to wear like white shirt like that. So I feel like I'm just, you know, a maitre d' or something like I'm, you know, sometimes you have an outfit on, you don't like the way it feels, you don't feel as confident or whatever. So I'm going through doing my thing, and we're taking groups of people through like 6 to 8 people, or I was gonna say like 4 to 8. And so at the end of this one tour, this one lady says, "Can I take a picture?" And I'm like, "Take a picture? What does that even mean?" You know? And she says to me, and it was a white lady. She said to me, "I work in the inner city in I can't remember what it was somewhere in the Southwest, like maybe Phoenix or something like that." And she said essentially, you know, the students that I work with never see a man in a tie, a black man in a tie. doing a professional job. And I was like, yo, look, it's just a thing I just personally would never think of. I mean, maybe it's because I just really like ties, you know what I mean? But like in general, I've never thought about whether or not I had seen a person in a tie to even know that that was a thing that I would want to do or could do or something, you know? So along those lines, that representation, like that was definitely a thing that opened my eyes literally just a couple years ago, where I was like, dang, you know, that stuff does matter, you know, so.
I think Brianna has something to say, but and I'm not even part of the panel, but I feel strongly that I need to say this. So, working very closely with our gym leadership here. And what I'm a big advocate for is literacy. I work in the real estate space and home buyer education, where it is still to this day, less than 50% of all Blacks across the US own a home. It's never top 50%. So so my company is very much about home buyer education and how we make that accessible and getting resources so people can have that dream of larger financial wealth down the road. And my new company, I've only been with them since June. I wasn't starting until a few days after George Floyd was murdered. And my new boss reached out to me, my new CEO reached out to me, and the next week, in my first week at the job, we had 5 actionable items related to what we could do as a company to help make a difference. I say that because when I've always thought about CrossFit and health and fitness, it's about health literacy that would make it more accessible for folks. And my husband can attest to this. I've always had a disdain for the open, and I refuse to give CrossFit more money. And here's why. $4,000 a year is what an average CrossFit affiliate membership is. So each affiliate, and there are 15,000 affiliates right now, as of 2019, $4,000 a year they have to give to be part of that. That's over $60 million. There were 358,000 open members, so people that gave $25 on the website to do the open as part of the community aspect, where 350,000 of us weren't going to go anywhere, right? A small portion made it to the games and have sponsorship in other companies. The games have Reebok and Rogue and other huge sponsors provide the equipment and aspects. And CrossFit as a whole is privatized. Greg Glassman was 100% owner. I knew this at the time, part of that literacy. And they have 700 employees. So let's say they give them each $100,000 a year as a salary and some benefits. There's still $58 million. I don't know where it goes. A year. I refuse to give them more money. And so taking that into account and knowing the impact of the space and countries and regions that CrossFit has affected. And I totally believe in the functional fitness aspect and the long-term health benefits. Richard, we love you at our 9 a.m. class because, by golly, like you're 84 and kicking and just kick ass every day. Like, you had more weight on the bar than me the other day. Like, I didn't know what to do with myself. Like, good to be loved or husband. So, like that shows you the long-term benefits of functional fitness and finding something that works for you, and then to not answer at all and not to respond. And douchebag former CEO who owns 100% of the company had the nerve and audacity to put out there what his tweet was. Like, that's real. Like, that's really what happened. And so I think it relates back to why we were already in our feelings because something had happened with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud, and we were all in our feelings, right? And then that came out, and being in our feelings, what our community, our fitness community reacted to individually is really what played an impact to where I think some of us are right now. And that impact, if you know Jonathan, who owns Community Unify Roanoke, that's why we changed our name right away. Like, he already feels a certain kind of way about CrossFit, but he's never strayed from the fact that he's about inclusiveness and about the fitness long-term aspects. Like, you know, the long-term effects and benefits in taking care of yourself and moving well. And that's why this facility did what they did. Sorry, just needed to say that. Yeah.
I just want to say one other thing related to the whole CrossFit thing, which I find kind of odd, going back to what I said earlier. CrossFit always gets preached. You know, CrossFit is for everyone. I feel like now with everything that's going on with COVID, really highlighting all the health disparities, more African Americans are really getting hammered by COVID-19 right now because they're more susceptible to have pre-existing condition, whether it be a heart condition, hypertension, diabetes. I feel like Greg Glassman's tweet at the time of COVID-19 is just kind of odd and insensitive, and should have been like a way for CrossFit to really step up as a whole and say, hey, we have this one community that's really lagging, that really could benefit from our services. We're pushing CrossFit Health pretty hard right now. Why not try to reach out to those communities that are suffering right now?
Okay, I'm gonna try to keep us on time. So we've kind of given some background. Are there any questions that have been prompted on?
We do have one question from Zoom. This is from a white participant. What can I do as a white individual that can help end racism and to make the Black and Brown community feel valued?
So we're not going to be able to end racism in our lifetime. Like, let's just throw that out there. We want to, it's just not gonna. It's so ingrained in every aspect of our society. We're talking specifically about fitness today, but we've heard about school, we've heard about your home. I mean, everything is layered in racism. And I can send out the sheet that I passed out, the Zoom link, so people on Zoom can have access to it. But I think Donald mentioned this, the most important thing is to reflect on how racism has impacted your life. Because once you can reflect, you grow in your awareness and your capacity to be able to hear stories and to learn from stories. And I think that is like the very first thing that people have to come to terms with, is that you may, I always hear well, I'm not racist. Well, let's face it, you're a white person in our society, you're racist. I mean, it's probably like a continuum, but you have had racist ideas, you've had racist thoughts, and you need to work to undo those. And there's lots of resources out there, and so just developing a basic awareness and educating yourself is the most important thing to do, so you can have those conversations with others.
And I think acknowledging your privilege is a huge, like how you benefit from racism is huge, and doing research on that and trying to understand. I think one of the first times I really understood some of what my privilege meant was when someone dear to me said for the first time that she realized that she's always been in the majority in the room. And like, she's never walked into a space and it's all Black people, right? Like, that's never happened to her. And I was like, that's funny, because that's my norm now, more than not, with most of our friends being people of color. And I was talking to some of our friends about it, and using this example, we talked about how when you were a kid, and you went to, like, say you went to a party or something like that, and you are probably not in the majority, right? And if something went wrong at that place, looking for someone who you can trust and who can be your ally, you couldn't even, if something happened and you needed help, you wouldn't even know that next door there would be someone who looked like you or could be your ally. You wouldn't even know that you could call the cops on someone that would show up that would look like you and could be your ally. And just realizing how that is so true and so different from my experience, where even no matter where I am, I can call the cops and I'm pretty sure someone who looks like me and could be my ally, or maybe doesn't look like me but still going to be my ally, will show up. And just realizing that privilege of just feeling safe in our system, and in the neighborhoods that you're in and things like that. Like, I feel like that really opened my eyes and has opened the eyes of some of my friends, and just understanding that it's so simple, but it really, I don't know, it changes your perspective. And so I think acknowledging your privilege and how racism benefits you, and how the system being set up for you as a white person, is so instrumental in having empathy and understanding, and also just knowing that you will never understand. I will never understand, even married to a Black man, I can never and will never understand what he goes through and what it's like to live in his shoes. And so even just acknowledging that will make you a better ally, because you're not trying to say like, oh, I'm just like you, oh, I get it, oh, no, you don't get it. The things that we deal with, not to say that we don't have our own struggles, but they are totally different than the, like, just all-encompassing, like Brianna was saying, like it hits every area, buying a house, exercising, going to the grocery store, what school you go to and how much funding it has. It's literally all-encompassing.
So I was gonna say, one thing you said about acknowledging your privilege, like people need to understand that whatever inherent advantages we have in life, that is okay. It is okay for you to be a person who is white and not to experience the things that some other people do. I don't blame you. I don't blame anyone who doesn't want to experience those things. You know what I mean? I completely get that. But I think the first thing we need to do is we need to say, so I make this analogy all the time about racism, where we all are kind of sitting in the same stadium, but some of us have better seats, right? And you can see what's going on more, or you have access to better resources or concessions or whatever, right? So in general, wherever your seat is in the stadium, that is okay. Like there's nothing wrong with you being a person who doesn't have to worry about going into a suit shop and the people, thinking that you're not gonna be able to buy a suit. Like there's nothing wrong with that. Like that's okay. Acknowledge that's a thing that you have. Like myself, like I'm Black, I certainly have challenges, yada, yada, but I'm also male. And there's a ton of privilege that comes with being male. For one, I never at any time ever worry about like walking my dog at night or where I am anytime after dark for that matter. Like I never think about that, not never. And I know that that's not the case for women. I never think about coworkers being like inappropriate with me or like saying things that are inappropriate or being like, just like, I never worry about that, And I know that those are things that other people worry about. And it's okay for me to understand that I don't know what that's like, and I'm not gonna get DM things, like people aren't just gonna send me like random things in my DMs like that are inappropriate and I would never want to see or whatever, But in general, it's okay that that's the fact, or it's okay that that is the the realm that I operate within. But the thing that I can do as a male is when I see things that are misogynist or I see things that are this or that, I can say something and I can speak up. So like I was at the pizza place downtown, Benny's, after a salsa thing last year when we could do things because there was no COVID, or maybe it was just like being born, you know what I mean? But I was at the salsa thing and we went to Benny's afterwards to get pizza, and like I'm standing there and there's a woman standing there like with another woman friend, there's another guy over there, and she's kind of minding her own business, and this other guy keeps like saying stuff like while she's trying to order, like clearly like trying to like holler at her, I guess, or whatever. And so in general, he gets like upset because she's not like responding to him because she's trying to order food, because you should have to like deal with people and order food, like that's how that should work, right? So I'm seeing this unfold, and I'm typically a person who is like mind my own business. I don't know who these people are, I don't know whatever. But again, after hearing those stories, after seeing that stuff, I'm like, yo, this is like literally right in front of me, like this is happening right now, you know what I mean? So she finally like acknowledges him and is like, hey, why don't you just like stop? You know what I mean? Like, why don't you just whatever she said. And he's like, oh, I can't remember what he said, but he said something that like really just set me up. I was like, my God, let's let the woman order food. What are you gonna do? Are you gonna fight a woman in a pizza place at 2 a.m? That's what you're gonna do? That's your next play? Like where does this end for you? Like where does this go for you? And like you don't have to necessarily like step up to people like that, but there are gonna be times where there are gonna be things that are misogynist and are racist. Those things oftentimes go hand in hand, right? There are gonna be times where those things are said in your presence when those other people aren't around, when there aren't women around, when there aren't men around, or I'm sorry, when there aren't women around, when there aren't Black people around, so I was going for it. So you know, in those times, like who are you, what kind of person are you in those moments, right? But it doesn't really matter whether or not you say something, but if this is something that you believe in, if this is something that you really want to try to change, if it's something that you really want to, this is how you want the world to be, where people can really be included and feel safe and can do things they want to do and not have to worry about some of those things, like who are you when it doesn't matter? Like that's the thing that I really think matters, because a lot of times, I mean, let's be honest, like you said, Kat, a lot of people are not in a space, like there have been countless times where I've been the only Black person in the room, like stores, class, enrichment programs, orchestra, track, you know, like just many different times, right? So I'm super used to that, but the opposite of that happening is not likely. So if that's not going to be the case, you're never going to be forced to be like, oh, I need to, you know, whatever. It's like, who do you really want to be? Because the person that you really want to be, your actions will dictate who that person is, not your thoughts and feelings, right? You can feel a certain way about something. I can feel a certain way about, you know, many things. But unless I do something about them, what does it matter? You know what I mean? Who's the person that you really want to be?
I think it's also important to acknowledge we're all imperfect and we're not going to get it right. And that part of the education process is asking questions and feeling like you have a safe space that you can ask those questions you feel icky about. And that you're not going to be judged in the process. And I will provide my own personal example of those are a lot of the conversations I have in my own household because I'm married to a white man. So you can obviously imagine that there's some interesting conversations that happen in our house. And we have an interracial daughter. And I can already acknowledge I will not understand her personal struggles because I'm not as interracial as she is. So allowing a safe space that he and I can ask questions that I'd be like, oh, I couldn't ask another white person about, or he's like, I don't have any other Black person to ask this about, and it's okay, is important. So if you can find someone who can be your advocate and ally, I'm gonna throw these people up here, these wonderful people under the bus, and hope that you would provide that ally and companionship that people feel like they could ask one-on-one questions if they don't feel like they could do it in an open forum like this. But because we're all a safe space, if there are questions, there are no dumb questions. So are there any questions in the audience or from the group?
Nothing on Zoom yet, but that's exactly what we want to facilitate here today. So yeah. Please be comfortable.
Bueller, anyone? Y'all are all good?
We have some prompts too.
I think I'm good.
So from the socioeconomic standpoint, there's not a whole lot I could do monetarily wise to help out or to try to change some of the things that children in poverty are going through. Is there something that I can do with my time that would make a difference for a young Black person?
So big brothers, big sisters is the right thing that you can do. You can also, I don't know what they're doing with the whole COVID situation, but the West End Center is a great place to volunteer. And there's a lot of other opportunities. Like if you follow No Justice, No Peace, like the same 40 people protest like almost every day. And I think they're burning out. And so refueling them, if we just dropped off water bottles there a couple weeks ago, just anything to try to, wherever you can fit in, I think is important. And there's a lot of volunteer opportunities in Roanoke specifically. So if there's something that is like a niche for you, I'm happy to help like find a placement to help with that.
Yeah, I was gonna say any places where you can help with where kids are involved is always good. Like the West End Center is a great thing. Roanoke City has opportunities to just go in and read to kids. Like I used to just go to Westside Middle School or
elementary.
That's where I grew up. Westside Elementary School here. I used to go in there and just read. Like it's nothing hard for you to do, but it helps because some kids don't have people to read to them at home. Like and not even just not even from like socioeconomic disparities necessarily. They're just kids who their parents just don't read as well, or their parents, eventually aren't going to be able to help them with their algebra. You know what I mean? Just because of, their disposition. So things like that. I would say too, I volunteered here for a long time. The Samaritan Inn, they help serve food to people in the area. I don't know the intervals that they do it now, but when I was heavily involved back in the day, like it used to be daily lunch. Like I would just like walk in there for work and like be there for an hour, serve lunch, and then leave. Like, I mean, and I know obviously people have to like work and do things like that, but there are generally resources, especially where kids are involved, where there are things that can help and can benefit, and they really do make a difference. Because I worked with kids for a long time before I moved here, in a children's home, and like, I mean, you know, just having an adult who is not, just having an adult around who's not high all the time, you know what I mean? Just having an adult around, and I'm not saying just like Black children in general, I'm saying kids in general who come from situations where they're generally poverty, you know, people want a little Novocaine for the night, you know what I'm saying? Like it's a thing that happens. So, but yeah, just having an adult around who's not high, having an adult around who's talking about things that they've never heard of. Why do people go hiking? What is hiking? Whatever it is that you do, float down the river. Like I literally float down the river for the first time just a couple weeks ago, because you know, I mean, literally, like there are things that you can introduce to kids, and like things that you can help them with, because a lot of times in life, like we get stuck in like these things that we see or whatever, and until something comes along and causes a paradigm shift, like, you know, like the Me Too movement, like for me, that was a serious shifting of my, you know, I had a daughter, I feel like I'm a pretty good dude, whatever, but like that just put it in overdrive to be like, I need to be way more cognizant of how I'm treating other people, and because that's the person that I want to be, you know what I mean? So, but yeah, there's lots of things.
Pandemic with,
The pandemic and our kids going virtual, Lord have mercy on all our souls. You're a teacher, aren't you? So you understand, like, I think that one, crisis management is an oxymoron, so it's already hard, and I feel for our administrators and our teachers and our parents. Like, I feel for us all, right? I'm right there with them, with a 5-year-old who's supposed to start school, and this is for New York. Physical education was probably not thought about as much as the other areas, like related to SOLs and things like that. So I think that there's going to be a big opportunity related to fitness and health that we could maybe provide videos or talk to a PE teacher. We've got a couple that are here at the gym that can provide and teach and outreach to those elementary school students. We can talk about other ways that we can provide videos and services, but I think PE and physical activity for our kids in the middle of the pandemic and not being able to be in a classroom full time is going to be imperative. And there's a great opportunity and a very open space right now for folks to get involved in.
early years.
Jariah, what do you mean by, like, I guess when you're at the CrossFit Games and you said you see a lot of Black people, and then the first cut, who wouldn't, and then I guess for all three of you, if anyone wants to answer, do you ever like feel like the need to act a certain race around, because you all grew up with, I guess, white people, like being a white school with white neighborhoods, it sounds like. Do you ever feel the need to like act white or act Black around a big group of Black people, or, you know, go back and forth between those two? If you have any thoughts on that?
So yeah, the only thing that I was prefacing about the first cut of the CrossFit Games last year, they opened up the new system where it's the top male and top female from like every country was basically a competitor there. Obviously, first cut was basically the only event where you basically saw Black people participating in the CrossFit Games because they were cut. And that's not to say that they weren't good athletes or anything. It's just the nature of the situation.
For the acting Black or acting white, and I know you don't mean this as a microaggression, but when someone tells me, I'll hear often, oh, you talk like a white person. And what they really mean is you don't sound ghetto, your sentences are really, you know, articulate.
That's not a white or black thing. That's just speaking. And again, I know you didn't mean it as a microaggression, but often people say that and it's really just a microaggression, kind of asking me why my sentences aren't broken up and basically why there's no weird slang in everything that I say.
Yeah, I think one thing about that too is like, so I've always taken that as, because I've obviously heard that a million times too, but to me, what that says is when someone says that I'm not speaking black, they mean that I actually sound educated and I don't sound uneducated like other people that they've heard. And one of the things that I think, the thing about a lot of the things that we think, or not think, the thing about a lot of those types of things is that they culturally come from somewhere. Like when slaves were brought over to this country, like they were just organized on purpose, not around other people that spoke their language. So language was super hard. And then also throughout the pantheon of time with regards to slavery, like it was not encouraged to communicate, it was not encouraged to whatever. So, you know, the things that have come from that in present day, a lot of times lead back to like actual events and whatnot. So, but I say all that to say like, yeah, so in general, there's a term, it's called code switching. And it's when I'm in a group of people like this, like let's say professionally, like when I'm talking to people in schools, that's what I do all the time, right? I'm talking to people in schools. I talked to people in school in Idaho yesterday, right? And I have a certain way that I try to speak when I am at work. And I use terms and things that I would not normally use just in the middle of the day, you know what I mean? Or just like on a call with my team or whatnot, you know? I mean, that extends to like, you know, like my mouth isn't the greatest sometimes, so sometimes I cuss, you know? But I would never do that professionally, you know what I mean? So number one, yes, I've definitely behaved differently in different situations, but the thing you're referring to with like, behaving a way that's more acceptable to white people when I'm around white people, and when there are no white people around, behaving a way that's more acceptable to my black friends. Yes, that is definitely a thing. The term for it is called code switching. That's what people call it. You see that anywhere in an article or what have you. But while that is a thing that I think that people do, I think that what I have personally tried to do is just be who I am in general in those situations. So make the jokes that I'm gonna make, use the terms that I use. If I use a term that like my friends over here don't understand, then I'm gonna tell you what it means or whatever, you know what I mean? But I'm not gonna not say that because that's not something I want to say around my black friends. And I'm also not gonna not do things or make jokes or be the person I am around white people either, you know what I mean? Like I'm gonna try to be the same either way. And like Angela mentioned, this is definitely a thing where like it's not gonna be like perfect all the time or comfortable all the time, you know, like there are definitely times where, you know, things are uncomfortable and they just are. And even if they, you know, they might feel better later, but in the beginning they're difficult, you know, even like having some of those conversations with people around you, like it's probably not gonna be comfortable the first time you call somebody out for making a black joke at work, you know what I mean? But once you do it, they're gonna know, yeah, Eric's not about that, you know what I mean? Or not Eric, but just like that person's not about that, you know? So, but yeah, but I think that, yeah, okay, that's all I got.
All right, we've got about 5 more minutes. Anyone else have any questions? Thank you, Emily and Eric, for asking questions. It's helpful.
One of the virtual participants underscored. Oh, okay. One of the virtual participants underscored that big brother, big sister always needs bigs. So that's a good way to volunteer time, especially with Donald's point about kids.
Yeah.
Great point.
Can we do some of our action items?
Yeah. Okay.
Because I feel like they're practical.
Go ahead.
So we were also asked, one of the prompts was about actual items, which I feel like could help as well. So one thing that people may not understand is that transportation is a huge barrier in our local community, which definitely disproportionately impacts people of color. So carpools, arranging class times around bus schedules, or other creative opportunities could help make fitness more accessible to all. Also, I think that we could have more food, cooking, and holistic wellness offerings, to Donald's point about that too. And then even sponsoring others. If you can easily afford your membership, then think about sponsoring someone else who can't afford it, or even just a part of it. And then also get people when they're young, mentorship and actively engaging younger generations so they see representation that looks like them in the fitness world is so important in starting that relationship. So those are my comments.
Yeah, I was gonna say, actual items, yeah, definitely about the young, like Angela and I were talking about trying to link up with organizations in the community, like the Weston Center to, I don't even know I don't even know what's possible, but just like reaching out in light of everything that's going on, reaching out to those people and to that organization, seeing if there's something that we can do with like, youth weightlifting or just like general CrossFit Kids workouts. Because, if you've done CrossFit for any amount of time, it's not hard to come up with a workout that like kids can do. You know what I mean? Like they're very functional things that they can do because of functional fitness. So, but in general, just like reaching out to those communities for that kind of thing. And I also want to say, just to piggyback on what Angela said, yeah, if anybody has any questions about anything that you don't feel comfortable by asking in front of people, definitely feel free to reach out to me. Like, find me on the socials, whatever. I'm going to be honest with you. So if it's like something that, you just need to be ready to hear like honest answers. But in general, if you really do have questions and you want to know, or you're curious about whatever, you can always holler at me. That's one thing I really tried to do during this time, because I guess around the time Colin Kaepernick started protesting way back when, a guy that I weightlifted with, I lived with this guy in New Zealand, not really know him very well, but we met at a good time in New Zealand, whatever. So he reached out to me on that same tip back in 2018 or what have you. And so we really talked about it. Like, we really talked about it. He was open, he was, whatever, we really talked about it. And then earlier this summer, we got up again, and he reached out to me. He's like, yo, man, I just want to let you know, since we had that conversation back in 2018, like, I definitely have a different perspective of obviously what's happening now, but also I've been able to talk to other people throughout the past couple of years about exactly like what's really happening and not what's being politicized and what's trying to, the way that his efforts are trying to be thwarted. So it was just a really good thing. So also trying to say is I'm always open for conversation with that.
Thank you.
I just have to say, for Michelle's sake, since she's not here to say this, when you talk about the Weston Center and YMCA and so forth, don't forget Boys and Girls Club. There's a huge need there, and she's been so incredibly busy this summer. People are reaching out to her from all over, practically Southwest Virginia, from Christiansburg, Blacksburg, Franklin County, and Roanoke County, of course, not just Roanoke City. And she's in the process now of opening, I believe it's at least three new facilities, one in Benton, another one in Franklin County, and is it another one maybe another one in Roanoke, I'm not sure, either Roanoke or Montgomery County. And they need volunteers, they need staffing. So if you know anybody that is looking for a job or has volunteer time, and they always need donations. So that's just a plug for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we love the Boys and Girls Club, and our gym, we usually help around Christmas time and try to help families in need. And we recently, we've done fundraisers, we'll support other events that are helping to raise funds. So yeah, their director is one of our members. It was awesome. So she's always open, asks questions, willing to help volunteer. So yeah, thank you for that. Okay, we got 1 minute. Anything else? It's a whole lot to cram into 90 minutes, y'all. We're troopers. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for our panel. You guys were awesome. Yeah, I know, like you said at the beginning, this probably makes you as uncomfortable as it does for everyone in the audience, but you guys were stellar. And so thank you for being authentic and open to this discussion. And thank you, Alex, for monitoring the Zoom. Yeah, thank you all for attending. We, as a gym facility, looking at the ideas and how we can, for our larger membership, implement some of those steps. We are very much about equality for all. So you might hear about future events coming up. We're hoping in the next couple of months to partner with ALT Athletics
Formerly
and
Outwad.
It is Outwad?
No, formerly Outwad.
Formerly Outwad, Out Athletics, which is formerly Outwad, and do a fundraising event and be, Alex, I'm gonna mess up the name, one of the first facilities.
Oh, they're looking at doing local chapters to support local youth, and so we're looking at the possibility of becoming the first one to do that.
So we're trying to do our part, and if you have suggestions or want to help start something, let us know and reach out, and we're always open to that. But we definitely are, that aspect I am not as versed in, so I will be doing a lot of learning, and I'm excited about that. But we'll definitely have other future events. I think I see an opportunity for a female panel, because that's a whole other subject that we could touch on. So let us know, and if you know someone that could benefit from just learning more about fitness and health and that aspect, definitely reach out, and we'd love to just talk with them. No money strings attached to that. Thank you guys so much. Enjoy the rest of your day.